So we're back for another episode of Percussion Discussion, and delighted to have two fabulous, incredible big band drummers with us this evening. And we've got from the UK, Mr. Pete Cater.
Good evening.
The fabulous from the USA, Mr. Butch Miles. Thank you for doing this, gentlemen.
Right here.
What can you say? Pete, over to you.
Well, okay. Well, I'll tell you, here's a pretty devastating place to start. Of all the drummers who are my big deal formative influences when I was like 13, 14 years old, who really showed the way, who really laid out the pathway of the kind of drummer that I wanted to become, Butch, you are the only one who is still alive.
Yeah, for me, yeah.
Yeah. So hanging in there and doing well. And what was really, let me tell you how I first became aware of you. I think it was in the autumn of 1977. And prior to that time, I'd grown up in a household. My dad was a good drummer. He always worked a day job, but he was a good drummer. He played a lot, and his musical tastes were impeccable. And so I grew up on a diet of basically Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, John Morello, and Louis Bellson. And these were guys, they were all part of my early life. Their records would be played in the house constantly. And then one Thursday evening, I'm watching the BBC. So it was autumn of 1977, and there was an arts program on the BBC back then called Omnibus, and the subject matter of this particular show was the Basie Band. And the footage, and I have it on a VHS in this cupboard over to my right, was recorded, I believe, at the Pavilion in Brighton. And there was Butch Miles on the drums. And why this was so important for me, I'll tell you why. Because having spent my early life listening to Buddy and Gene and Louis and Joe, those drummers, they were totally the kind of players I wanted to be. But they were all of, my father's or my grandparents' generation even. And then along comes you, and you must have been about, 33 years old at the time, I'm thinking. And here's this much, much younger guy playing in this classic style. And this was an absolute game changer for me, because suddenly it became much more relevant to a young person like me. And, the impact of that is I can't overestimate it, even slightly. Suddenly it became, as I say, relevant, much more attainable. It was somebody who was much closer in age to my generation. And I thought, right, well, hey, this isn't just like old guys' drums. This is something I can aspire to. And this is absolutely the truth. Had it not been for you, I might have kind of gone down the John Bonham or some other kind of pathway. But seeing a much, much younger player, because I'm reckoning you would have been about 33 years of age at that time.
What year was this? What year was this?
77.
70 what?
77.
Yes, I was 33. Yes.
Right. Yeah, spot on. So whereas Buddy was like 60, Louis and Joe were a little bit younger, and Gene, who was already 4 years past at that time, it suddenly all came down and came much closer to my generation, and in a way became much more relevant. And I thought, well, this guy is a young guy playing this way, so I can do that too. And I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you. Thank you very, very much. I had no idea.
Why would you know? That's exactly how it happened. As I say, it was like a breaking a kind of generation gap, and then it brought it much closer to me in that kind of way. And when you're a teenager, you're very impressionable about these kinds of things, and to see a much younger drummer playing in the way that I wanted to play made it suddenly much more reachable and much more attainable. So, cheers, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to stick with water these days.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Well, I appreciate that very much. I got started also at a young age. My mother we had no musicians in the family, per se. I have no idea where it came from because nobody played an instrument or even sang in my family. But for some reason, I was drawn to drums very early.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was quite a dancer in her younger days. She loved to dance and she loved the big bands.
Right.
So she had a little bit of a record collection. I would listen to Glenn Miller and guys like that. But then there were some jazz festivals that began cropping up around the country, and a few that were close to where I lived. I'm originally from the state of West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm a mountaineer, a hillbilly. I
Yeah.
used to talk like this, y'all. You know how I mean? We're going on down the holler and get into
This is getting like Deliverance here.
So I wound up, I saw that there was a jazz festival.
Uh-huh.
A jazz festival in Virginia Beach, Virginia, which wasn't all that far from where I lived. So I was about 15 or 16 at the time, I think. My mother and I jumped in the car, drove over there, got a hotel and stayed for the weekend. That's when I first saw Count Basie and Sonny Payne. He was the big band drummer I saw that early. And Sonny was at his height then. I mean, he did everything. He bounced sticks off the sky. He would do all his tricks, and he was so
Yeah.
he played so great. I loved it.
You couldn't take your eyes off him.
Pardon me?
With Sonny, you just could not take your eyes off him. It was just so, you've got the whole band on there. There's only one place you could look.
Through Sonny, I discovered Gene Krupa.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
From Gene, I got a bigger appreciation of Sonny, and then it went on to Joe Morello, and then ultimately I saw Buddy Rich when he was with the Harry James Band.
Right.
He formed his own big band now. And it was so incomprehensible to me. I couldn't understand it. It was like it was way above my head what Buddy was playing.
I think that period between 62 and 66 with the James Band is actually some of his best playing.
Oh my gosh. I just, I couldn't even fathom what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But Sonny was my favorite drummer. Probably of all time, I've had maybe 5 favorite drummers that were very influential. With Sonny Payne, with Gene Krupa, with Buddy Rich, with Joe Morello, and with Louis Bellson.
Well, snap. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I got away from the rock and roll band I was playing with in high school and started to learn how to play some jazz.
Mm-hmm.
My teacher used to take me around town to jam sessions, late night jam sessions is where I really learned. On Fridays and Saturday nights, where you go in, all the musicians would show up somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning and then jam until dawn.
Yeah.
Then we'd all go and eat breakfast. And that's where I learned an awful lot, Peter. I would imagine you learned quite a bit on the job too, where you have to show up and you have to play.
Well, I did. Went from because like you, I'm quite tall, and I got tall quite young. So I was able to get into like places where adults, where kids were not supposed to go, from probably about the age of 12 or 13 onwards. And I would just go around with my dad, and he would be playing jobs with bands, usually about like 7 or 8 pieces. So it'd be like a horn section and a rhythm section, and most of it was reading. And he would just throw me in the deep end. And without any pressure, he was there to kind of bail me out if I screwed up, which luckily I didn't very much. And I got a lot of like real world, first-hand experience doing that. Playing with musicians who were probably 30, 40, 50 years old, maybe even older, when I'm like 13 or 14. Before I even found out about like student jazz bands and things like that, which was the next part of the journey.
Yes, it's a great education, especially working with musicians who have been around a long time. They've got a wealth of knowledge, and you can learn so much from them.
Sure.
Without their even knowing that they're teaching you.
Mm-hmm.
All you got to do is just keep your mouth shut and your ears open.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The one saving grace that I had was that I've been a bit of a mimic all my life. It doesn't take long to be able to do something. If I see somebody do it, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times, then I've got it. And
yeah, you know, I'm very similar.
You know, I don't know whether they're doing it rudimentally or whether it's a, you know, the sticking is correct, but I hear it. I first started learning to play literally by ear. If I heard a pattern, I could play that pattern over and over without knowing whatever it was I was playing.
Yeah. Yeah, I did exactly the same. I spent my teens, you know, listening to Buddy, Louie, Joe, and yourself, and just trying to replicate what I heard without having to have any kind of theoretical or technical knowledge of, you know, what the sticking was or what the rhythm was or the orchestration, but just like kind of, as you say, mimicry. And it's how you learn a language, isn't it? You learn how to speak. You learn phrases from your parents. And this is how you develop your vocabulary. And I believe that music works in exactly the same way.
That's exactly it. I learned, to this day, I'll look at younger musicians because, you know, we have like a set list we call the Great American Songbook. I'm sure involved a lot of stuff. Yep. And we have music that in my teaching with the jazz department at Texas State, we have a list that our jazz majors need to learn the tunes, how to play them. And there's freshman year, sophomore year, etc. But there's so many tunes that I learned coming up that nobody knows about them because they never played them. These were some of the big jam tunes. There's a tune called, I bet you may know this one, Lullaby of the Leaves.
Absolutely, yeah.
That was a big one. And to this day, I still hear it in my head. I know it from start to finish, but I've never played it since I left Charleston, West Virginia. Nobody knows. And here's a story about your memory. You keep all of that stuck in here, so anytime you need to call on it, you know, somebody says, Peter, give me a certain type of a beat. You've played it before, and you remember it. It could be 10 or 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, I can go into various big bands, and they'll put up charts that I haven't played in 25 years. I don't even need to look at them.
Absolutely.
And, you know, really, I mean, I'm not talking about in the mood, but, you know, like Bob Florence things that go on for like 8 or 9 minutes, and I know every twist and turn of them. I spent many years touring around the UK playing Buddy's repertoire, and I could play the whole thing without ever having to make any kind of reference to a chart because that's what I grew up listening to. And those formative influences, they're really important. I think they really mark us out for the kind of musicians that we're going to be.
Well, it stays with you. The very first band that I ever worked with was a quartet. We would play every Friday night. I was a senior in high school at that time, and we played every Friday night. It was a interesting quartet: the piano, drums, cornet, and alto saxophone. No bass, no guitar, but they knew very old tunes, and they played a lot of stuff for which I hated at that time. You know, I'm a teenager. I want to learn all the latest things, and I want to play all the hip jazz tunes. They didn't play any of them. But the case that I'm making here, the moral of this story is the point. We used to play every weekend. The leader of the band called his favorite tune, which was Rosalie. Rosalie, my darling, Rosalie, my love. I hated that song. Rosalie, my darling. And it just, I couldn't wait to never play it again in life. As life went on, I never did play it again. We left Dissolve now about 40 years later. I'm lucky enough, before I leave New York City, I get a call to do a Woody Allen movie called Crimes and Misdemeanors.
Okay.
And I do the sound track also. Woody is an old-time music fan. He loves old music.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had a special request for the band to play. Guess what the tune was? I swear, Rosalie, and I still remembered it.
I've always admired Woody for how he credits the musicians in the end titles of his movies. I think that's deeply commendable, and you know, actually he has his Monday night residency to this day. And the drummer that he has now is a guy called Kevin Dawn. He's actually a student of mine who, when he comes to London about twice a year and has a lesson and goes back. So the world is a lot smaller than we think. So what was the turning point? When did it all really start to happen for you, Butch? And was it with Mel Torme?
Right before Mel, I had moved around. I was living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the home of the University of Michigan.
Yep.
And I was working in Detroit off and on. I was making some progress. I was gigging in a few bands here and there. And there was a nightclub outside of Detroit in a town called Plymouth, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a great nightclub there that used to have name entertainment all the time. And I knew a couple of the guys in the band. The drummer was semi-unsteady, and he had an episode one night where he just went bananas and decided, instead of the old Joe Jones story, instead of somebody throwing any cymbals at him, he would throw the cymbals at them. He just started throwing drums off the stage. Well, he got fired. And I got a call. He said, "Can you come in?" And I said, "Okay, sure." I said, "Well, we're going to do a couple of nights by ourselves, and then the great comedian and singer Kay Stevens is coming in for a week. And then after that, Mel Torme is coming in for a week." Well, I had just started sitting in with big bands around Detroit, and they were taking a big chance on me. But I came in and I played Kay's show. It was a lot of fun. And I had nothing to worry about because it's just so natural. I don't know, me and big bands were very natural, Peter, right from the start.
Yeah.
I had no idea why, because I had no background in that whatsoever, except listening to my mother's old records.
Sure.
Anyway, Mel came in, and you know the kind of charts he had. They were all hip and swinging and stuff.
Yeah.
And I loved playing them. It was great. So here's the fun part of the story. You know, this is actually true, absolutely true. We finished up on a Saturday night. Mel was leaving town the following day to fly back to LA. And I had a rehearsal with this other big band in downtown Detroit Sunday afternoon. So I packed my drums. I never left them at the club. I had things to do on Sunday. So I packed my drums up and I left. The next morning I get up and I drive into Detroit, and we're getting ready to rehearse. I've set up the drums, and the leader, one of the co-leaders of the band, comes over and he says, "Hey, did you hear about the club?" And I said, "No, what happened?" He said, "Burned down last night." What? It burned to the ground. And, oh gosh, it was horrible. The whole place, no one was hurt. Fortunately, it happened like 3 a.m. No one was hurt, but it was a lovely club called Lofies, Lofy''S, I remember. Mel had left town. I had my drums. The leader of the band, unfortunately, lost his entire book, his entire library.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, I found myself totally out of work, and the club was burned down, and there was nothing to do. That's Sunday. Monday, I get a phone call from Mel. He's just checking up on me. He wants to know how I'm doing, how's everything going, and I tell him I'm out of work. He says, "Oh, what happened?" And I told him, and so he calls the owner of the club to express his regrets. Then he calls me back and offers me a job. I had nowhere to go, and Mel Torme being Mel Torme, whoa, talk about being in the right place at the right time. So I went on the road.
All right.
That's how that happened.
And any particular highlights from your time at Mel that you think of to this day?
What wasn't? One time, here in the United States, we used to do a thing. Jerry Lewis used to do
the telephone, yeah.
Dystrophy.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry and I were old friends, and we used to open for Jerry when he would play the Sahara Hotel in Vegas. One year, Jerry got the bright idea. We were going to come on, do the 2 shows in Vegas, then Mel and I were going to fly to New York directly into the telethon that was being put on there. Because he had, various telethons around the country, but the main one was in Vegas, and the second main one was in New York. So we did this way before Phil Collins did this. It was a Feed the World, where Phil went out,
Live Aid,
I believe, and then flew wherever he was going to fly. So we flew from Vegas overnight, got into New York, and showed up at the studios and performed. So we were there at the start of the telethon and there at the end of the telethon. It was great fun. It's something I've never done since. It was exhausting, and I loved it. But, I'll tell you one, Robert Morley. You remember Robert Morley?
Yeah.
The actor?
Yeah.
I met Robert Morley one time. We were in Australia, my first trip out of the United States. Mel and I were playing a place called Hobart. It was in Hobart, the Rest Point Casino in Hobart, Tasmania. And who happened to be having a holiday there but Robert Morley? This wonderful, I say, oh boy, he was just so British. It was amazing. And he showed up in the lobby one day with his beautiful shoes, his socks, his Bermuda shorts. He wasn't exactly physically fit. He was a bit rotund. And he made quite a spectacle, and he was just the most delightful guy. But he and Mel knew each other because Mel had been married, or was at that time married to Janet Scott.
Of course, yeah.
So he knew a lot of people in British cinema. And we played a lot of places. I got so many opportunities and so many entries into show business through Mel. I got to know Buddy very well through Mel.
Sure.
He and Mel and Buddy were on again, off again, best friends, serious enemies, best friends. I mean, it just went back and forth all the time. Mm-hmm. But there are so many highlights working with Mel. I really learned an awful lot.
What about recordings?
Pardon me?
What about recordings with Mel?
I'm sorry, say again?
What about recordings, notable recordings in your time with Mel?
Actually, I made one, thank you. I made one 45 with Mel. Trying to remember, there was one called Morning Star. And then the flip side, I like much better, but I can't remember what the name of it was. We did do one album before I was finally, shall we say, released. I'm not going to go into that at all. But it was live at the Masonette. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
You'll notice my name is nowhere on there, too.
No, I know.
And my the illustration of some drummer's got long hair and a mustache. There's a reason for that. I'm not going to go into it. That's a very good album, Peter.
It really is. Yeah, I used to listen to that all the time in my late teens. It was a very, very influential record.
Mel was a great arranger. Everything on that album he arranged all of those charts.
Yeah.
He arranged them. So I remember exactly from start to finish. He did superb work, just magnificent. It was a pleasure to play all those charts because the charts were almost like they were written for the band, not for the singer. Normally, and you've worked enough, exactly when you're backing a singer, the singer, you're there to help, not to intrude. With Mel, it was all guns blazing. The band could be screaming. I could be back there crashing everything I could find, and he would still swing over top of it.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah. So then, Count Basie.
Well, this was in the period after Mel and I had, shall we say, parted company. And, well, that's all, like Forrest Gump said, that's all I'm going to say about that. I called a few people that I knew, and I just basically said, I'm out of work. One of the guys I called was Buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. One of the things I've always wanted to do ever since I was a teenager and saw him live the first time was sit in with the Count Basie band. I don't care if I never play with him. I would love to sit in. I know Basie's got a drummer. But anyway, that's just a thought. And Buddy said, well, I'm going to be in Boston in a week. Call me at this number, et cetera, et cetera. I'll talk to you then. Okay. So I called him, and he said, Basie's in L.A. right now. They're in Hollywood. They're playing Disneyland or something. Here's the number of the hotel, and here's the road manager. Talk to him, Sonny Cohn. And we said goodbye. I called L.A. and talked with Sonny, and he said that Basie was aware that I was available, and he would keep me in mind. It was kind of like a little bit of a brush off, which I didn't mind at all. At least, it was okay. Because Basie had seen me play with Mel a number of times. He was a big fan.
Yeah.
And whenever we were somewhere in the same city, that Basie and the band were playing, and we were finished before they were, we'd go to see them. So it was back and forth. And Basie used to come to see us when we played at the St. Regis, where that record was recorded. The Masonette Room. So anyway, this is about a week later. I'm not going to go into the setup, which is really strange. It's right out of a movie. But a week later, I get a call, and it's the road manager saying that Mel's new drummer had been in a car wreck, or he was in the hospital in Chicago, and Count wanted to know if I could fly out and do a couple days. Of course I could. So I grabbed my drums, I grabbed the one suit I owned, I flew to Chicago. We opened at, he's just passed away a short while ago, Joe Siegel, bless his heart. He used to own the Jazz Showcase in Chicago.
Yeah.
And we opened at a place called the Happy Medium, which was upstairs from what later became the Jazz Showcase. I think Joe had something to do with the entire building. But we opened that night, and it was quite unseen, no rehearsal. It was cold. I know you've been in this position where you got to sit down and play with a band that you admired, but you've never worked with before in your life, and your sight will save your soul. That's exactly what happened to me the first night.
Right.
It worked out because the next day on the road manager asked if I could stay around for about a week. And I said, yeah, I sure could. Their drummer was, injured more than they really thought. Mm-hmm. Well, that week turned into 4.5 years. And that's how that happened.
This is 75, is this roughly? 75, 76?
I joined in January of 75.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right on the date.
Yeah, so, and some great records came out of that period. All those Pablo records with the black and white colors, they're outstanding.
Norman Granz.
Yeah. And Sammy Nestico, of course.
The first album I made with Basie was a Nestico album.
Yeah.
Basie Big.
How much of a presence was Sammy when those records were being made? Was he in the studio, kind of directing the traffic, or did he just leave the charts with the band and you just kind of play them in on the road and then just go into the studio and record them straight out?
I'm not exactly sure. My memory has me. I'm so excited about everything anyway, but my memory in the studios, the first one was at RCA Studios, I think we recorded in New York. The second one was out in LA, second and third were in LA. Sammy was there whenever we did all his music, but I don't recall him being a big presence. Now I do recall him with Basie a lot and explaining some things to Basie, but the final say-so came from the piano.
Right.
Basie was playing and what he wanted to do and how he did it.
Okay.
Sammy was there to more or less as a guide because his writing was just so great.
Sure.
And it fit so well. There wasn't a whole lot to do except rehearse a couple of times and then cut it.
Mm-hmm. So, and then after that, having gone from one gig that I would love to have had, you went to another gig which I would love to have had, which was Dave Brubeck.
Yes. That was like a dream. I had met and known Dave for years. And the same thing, he was a huge Basie fan.
Right.
His drummer, Randy Jones,
yes,
was leaving. This was 1979. And he wanted to know if I was interested in joining the quartet. Well, I've been with Basie for 4.5 years at that point. And
I bought this when I was 16. There you are on the back. That's a handsome young man.
There's Dave and Chris Brubeck, Jerry Bergonzi, one of the great tenor players, and me.
Oh, really?
At the store. We did that out in Concord, California.
Yeah.
Anyway, I finally was able to give Basie my notice, and I left the band. Basie was such a gentleman, Peter. He had fun with me. He knew that I was taking a big step, leaving him and going with Dave, and I worked so well with the band. He thought he'd have some fun with me. I gave him my notice, my 2-week notice, and he accepted it. And about 2 days later, he wanted to talk to me, and so he said, look, we've got this European tour coming up, and I was wondering if you could stay like another month until we get finished with Europe. It's a big tour. Oh, well, okay. So I called Dave, and I told him I'm staying extra time. Then about 2 days later, basically said, we got a recording date coming up after Europe, and I want you to, and finally it dawned on me, he's playing me. He's having fun through how this young boy, because I was all of about 37 at that point, young boy, right, 37 to 38, was going to get out of this. So I finally figured out what he was doing. He was just having a laugh. Mm-hmm. So I got back to him the next day, and I said, Chief, I'd love to do all of this stuff, but now I'm going to have to go back, and instead of the original 2 weeks that I gave you, I'm going to have to leave in a week. And so he knew that I caught on to the joke, so we decided on the original 2 weeks.
Oh.
It could have been I'm looking at your stick control over there. I've got an old copy that's falling apart also. It could have been very interesting because, how do you go with a big, fat, swinging band like Basie's, the time signatures and the stripped-down motifs of David? It was no problem because Joe Morello had been one of my favorite drummers all through my team.
Sure.
And I knew a lot of his music. So I just kind of like slid into the drum spot and tried to underplay as best I could.
Yeah.
Situation.
Yeah.
And try to channel Joe whenever I could.
Well, that's how the music is. This is what we do. This is how the music is supposed to sound, and that's that for me has always been for any assignment, any professional assignment. That's always been the frame of reference. What did the composer have in mind? What did the arranger have in mind? How did the predecessors in these environments, what did they bring to it, and what do I need to take from them? And those three kind of pivotal points are where we get our direction from. After Dave Brubeck, there was a little bit of solo.
He's going to pull out another CD now, something or coming out.
Excuse me, these are vinyls.
Did you have a favourite track, Butch, with Brubeck? Did you have one that you enjoyed more than others? There's a lot to choose from, I appreciate.
You mean of all the recordings that Dave did?
Yeah, one to play live, or which...
There was one I wanted to play that I never did that I just adored. And it was from, Peter will know this one. It was from the Brubeck Quartet live at Carnegie Hall.
Castilian drums.
Yeah. Exactly. I never played.
I totally get why you would want to play it, but but there's Joe left nowhere to go with that after that.
I know.
What are you gonna do? So after that, there was a little bit of a kind of very much into a world that I became a part of a few years later, and this was record labels like Famous Door and Arbors and Novel Hair and albums like this one.
Oh, that's my White Album.
Yeah, the Butch Miles White Album. That's it.
That was fun. By the way, if you look closely at that album cover, you'll notice
you got no shoes on. I know that. And we have this one as well, and so as far as I could see, you then became a part of this almost like not wishing to make this sound in any way kind of demeaning, this kind of international traveling circus of mainstream jazz with all these great players who would just turn up at all these various festivals around Europe and Japan and around the USA. And a lot of these players I also worked with, people like Charlie Bird, George Masso, Harry Allen, quite a few others who, at this time of the evening here in England, whose names are not coming to mind. So, how did you find that going from something like Basie and Brubeck, where the repertoire was very specific and very pre-planned, to going back to maybe something that was perhaps more of a resonance with your earlier life, where guys were just like calling tunes and saying, okay, let's play Lady Be Good in F, and it might go on for 4 minutes, it might go on for half an hour. So that much more, I guess, looser approach to playing. How did you deal with that? And did you always?
I know that you'll understand this also, Peter, because once again, I've got to go back to the story about Rosetta.
Oh, yeah.
Because all of that stayed in here. And while I didn't get a chance to use a lot of it, I knew a lot of it.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, I'd be able to pull out something that I knew. Let's say, what's that? The Benny Goodman on Avalon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ending of Avalon.
Yeah.
You know it just as well as I know it.
Yeah.
So the first time I played it with somebody, it was a clarinetist, and he went into the ending. I went into the ending immediately also because I knew it. And I did something that Basie told me, and I'm sure that Buddy probably told me. I'm sure you've heard it also, and other people have told you. Listen.
Yeah. Listen, and listen. And then listen some more.
And Duke Ellington used to tell his musicians, especially, whoever the drummer was at any time, he liked to think of his band as action and reaction. And his music would be the action, and the drummer playing it would have the reaction. And you don't go in there sometimes with a set idea of what you're going to play, because a different drummer, you might play the same thing I'm playing, same tune, same chart, but your reaction to it would be different. Therefore, we'd have a different style, a different feeling, a different feel, or a different drum break, because you're hearing and reacting different from what I do. But it's action and reaction. I teach a lot of that.
Yeah.
If that's your immediate reaction, it probably is not wrong. If it's your immediate reaction. Now what you have to do is go back and dissect it and find out why you played that. And did it really work? I mean, I played a ton of stuff that just sucked.
Yeah, well, who hasn't? Who hasn't? This is...
So I've got a recording somewhere. I think we did, I don't know whether it was Montreux or some other place. I've got a 4-bar drum break that is so out of tempo and out of time, I don't know how in the hell the band stayed together. It's just one of those things.
Who is that with?
That was with Basie.
Okay. Hang on.
Oh, no.
I don't remember which tune it was, and I don't remember which album it was on, but it was a live recording. I remember that. Oh, I know what happened. I remember. Oh. Peter let the cat out of the bag a little while ago when he was talking about John Bonham. We did a concert. It might have been this one, the one that he's going for the album. We did a concert, and Led Zeppelin was there. They were back in one of the extra private rooms that was full of people who were recording, or people or somebody. There you go. Yep. Somewhere in there, you've got me just falling all over the place. Just awful. And I believe that was the night we were playing, and Led Zeppelin was up in one of those private booths somewhere. They wanted to.
Okay.
And I met John Bonham after the show. I've got a photograph of the two of us.
I've seen it.
So that was you talk about a highlight. Oh my gosh. Well, to this day, I'm still working on those damn triplets of his.
You know what? It's funny you should mention John Bonham. It's actually 40 years today when he died. Today.
That's right. It is.
Yeah. So there we are.
Yeah. No, he was a big influence on me in his own way because I liked Led Zeppelin. And I like so many of the rock groups too. I've been fortunate enough to meet a very nice jazz drummer who just happened to make $1 zillion in rock and roll called Charlie Watts. I've seen Charlie with his quartet. I saw Charlie one time in New York. He was on tour. He had a 33-piece band.
Oh, God, yes.
I don't even remember. He had like 2 bass players, 2 piano players. He had 8 or 9 saxes.
Yeah, there were 2 other drummers he had on that.
There were 3 drummers.
Yeah.
Did you know why?
I could guess, but
I'll tell you from not Charlie's mouth, but bless his heart, Danny. I'm drawing a blank on Danny's last name all of a sudden. A wonderful British tenor player.
Danny Moss.
Yes. Danny was in that band.
Right.
And I asked him one night, I said, Danny, you know, when I saw you guys at wherever the ballroom was and that huge band, and he said, right. And I said, I can't even do his accent. He was very Cockney, and Americans don't do a Cockney accent. So
No. Well, as Dick Van Dyke has shown us.
3 drummers. I mean, 2 drummers and him. He's sitting right in the middle. And by the way, Charlie smiled all night long. You don't see Charlie Watts smile very often.
He's not renowned for it. Let's put it like that.
That's one way to put it. But anyway, Danny told me, he said, well, I'll tell you, Butch, he says, there's 3 drummers up there for this. The one on Charlie's left can read. The one on Charlie's right can swing. And Charlie puts the butts in the seats.
Yeah.
Bless his heart. He's gone now. He's passed away.
Yeah.
But I thought about that for a while, and it was true up to a point for big bands, I think. But Charlie could swing on his own. He did a nice job.
Oh yeah. He's done some smaller bands. He's done like a boogie woogie thing with a piano player whose name escapes me, and Dave Green on bass. And he had an 8-piece for a while, about 20 years ago. It sounded good. It sounded good.
That sounded good. Yeah. They came through Houston many, many years ago, and my wife Linda and I went down to see them, and we got backstage passes to go back. And not the first time, but the longest time that I had a chance to talk with Charlie. I'd met him before, but not very long. But this time, this was before the show, and we had a chance to talk. And he didn't want to talk about the show. He just wanted to talk about jazz. Talk about jazz. He wanted to talk about
his passion. Yeah.
Don't forget rock and roll. Let's talk about swing.
Yeah.
So I know that I'm positive that you're asking me a number of the questions about where did I go from here, where did this particular sound that I played come from, and why did I not sound exactly like the Count Basie band when I played with Dave Brubeck? You know all the answers to that.
Sure.
Also have had many similar experiences, because you haven't just stayed in one place. You didn't show up on the scene and stay there for 40 years in one band or one spot. You've worked around, had your own big bands.
Exactly. Yeah.
Lots of different things. So you've got all kinds of that experience that you draw on also.
Sure.
I'd like to know some of the groups that were influenced, the bands that influenced you, and maybe some of the British drummers.
Well, for me, there was only really one. I admired a great many of the British drummers, but for me, there was only one guy who really stood head and shoulders above the rest, and that was Kenny Clare, who, of course, you will remember very well.
Oh.
I thought you were going to say Phil Seaman for a minute as well.
Yeah, for me, it was always Kenny. My dad was friends with him. I got to meet him when I was about 13. He kind of, the wheel had turned, and he wasn't kind of the fashionable studio player anymore, because everything had gone down towards pop music. And so he was out doing different things, playing live much more, and doing a lot of, he did this, it's quite, he was kind of foreshadowing a lot of what goes on now. He would do this thing called a traveling drum school, and he would just show up in your town with his drums and some tapes and some charts and things like that, and run the whole thing down. And I got to see him do that when I was about 13. But for me, it was always, it was all the American players. It was you, Buddy, Louis, Joe, Krupa, Philly Joe, Mel Lewis, and of all the British players, as I said, I put Kenny Clare, I felt, was in a place all by himself. And much as I admired all the other guys, you know, people like Ronnie Verrill and Jack Parnell and Bobby Orr and all the rest of them, but Kenny, I felt, was just like very much a superior musician. And I felt he could hold, and you know that record that he did with Buddy and Louis in 1971 called Conversations.
Yes.
And you know, he very much holds his own on that. I mean, those two didn't really leave him much room, and you know, they both play out of their skins on that record. But he absolutely holds up the stature and reputation of the old country throughout those two sides of that vinyl record. So for me, it was always Kenny. And it was Kenny and the American drummers, so that was where it all came from for me.
I love Little Kenny, and we called him Little Kenny because, you know,
because he
wasn't 7 feet tall, but
no.
Kenny was a giant. When he sat down behind the drums, he was.
Yeah.
Oh, I was lucky enough one night. I was out. I was in London. I didn't have anything to do, and a couple of us. I don't even remember which band I was with. A couple of us got together and we took a taxi over to the pizza. Mm-hmm. And we went downstairs, and the Pizza All-Stars were there that night. And I walked in, and someone said, "You're very lucky. The A band is here tonight."
Right.
Kenny on drums. Mm-hmm. So I sat there all night long and listened to him play, and it was just delightful. It was just makes me smile now thinking about it.
Yeah.
It was so great. There was a number of really fine drummers on both sides of the pond. It was a shame that a lot of your guys didn't get as much publicity over here on my side.
Yeah, it's always been very much one-way traffic, and one of the strange things with me is I get so much positive feedback and response from the United States in a way that a lot of British drummers just simply don't do. And I think I've played 2 gigs in the USA in my entire life. One of them was the Hollywood Bowl, and the other one wasn't. But I've always been very flattered by how you know, a lot of the guys over there on that side of the pond kind of are in a way a little bit more tapped into what I do than maybe some of the people over here are, apart from people like our very generous friend Matty, who's hosting this fine event this evening. But it's always been without you know, because we have, you know, the internet, we have the social media, we have YouTube and all the rest of it. The amount of generous feedback I've had from drummers in the United States has been hugely flattering to me, and something that's very, you know, very much in my heart. Something, you know, all kinds of friends all around the industry who are cool and have been very, very generous in their praise of my humble efforts behind the traps.
Well, you know, it'd be great to see you both on the same show, maybe, if you're ever over in the UK. But
do you know, I have thought about that more than once already.
Well, as Matty, it might be a little bit too late. Might be a little too late because Peter's career is still going great guns. Everybody knows.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
Well, it would be fun. It's. Oh, you're talking about that. You know, you brought that. Let me tell you one thing, and you, Peter, a story. Once again, you appreciate this very much, I'm sure. I've never been able to play, and I've tried, but I've never been a 2-bass drummer. I can't play 2-bass drums or even a double pedal. I'm not very good at it. I'm a one-trick pony, and crashing the cymbals, and that's about it. Well, a couple of times I was at a jazz, what they call party, and Louis Bellson was also there. One year we sort of got together and we played a little drum thing, which was a lot of fun. Then another year, about 2 or 3 years later, they got the two of us back together again. Someone said, let's have another drum battle, which I hate the term, but there was what they wanted to hear. So I'm there with my standard 4-piece set, a couple of cymbals, one drum, 2 tom-toms, and that's it. And Louis is sitting on my left, and he's got every drum in the city up on the stage. He looks like Terry Bozzio after a birthday. I mean, there's drums every place. Oh, my goodness. So we're going to do some fun, have some fun. I'm usually a stickler, like I know you are, on checking all the wing nuts and the screws and the connections on the drum set to make sure nothing is loose or wobbly. The one thing I didn't check on was the connection of the bass drum beater to the pedal. Mea culpa, I didn't do it. I just assumed. So we're playing and we're doing things back and forth, and it comes time, we're having fun, and it comes time for me to play a long solo, and then Louis is going to wrap it up with a huge solo. So I start to play, and I'm really gunning for him. My chops are up and everything, and I get probably maybe about 60 seconds into it, and the pedal flies, the beater flies out of the pedal. I've got no bass drum. So Louis sees what happens. He knows what's going on. He's sitting over there with all these drums and 2 bass drums. So I finish up the best I can, and I turn to Louis, and I bow, and I'm praying, please, Lord, take it easy on me, will you? One thing about Louis Bellson, he is the nicest man on earth.
Completely agree.
He smelled blood. I had no bass drum. He has 2. And he just basically cut me a new one. All I could do is sit there and smile while I'm thinking, you dirty, and Louis' feet are flying. That's just his feet. And there's nothing I can do except sit there and just bow to the man because it's incredible. But he really went for it, too. I said, aha, I've got him now. And, he showed me what he could do, and it was brilliant. But he saw an opening, and he took it. Knowing what a wonderful gentleman he was, I find it kind of hard to imagine him being quite so competitive as that. Well, on stage, behind a set of drums, things are a little different. Yeah, sure, of course. Listen, you've played with everybody, I would imagine, from trios up to big bands and maybe symphonies, haven't you? Oh, yeah. Because I haven't followed all of the groups that you've worked with over the years. But I assume, because of your reputation and because of the recordings that I've heard, that you've played with just about everybody there is to play with. Well, in a very specific niche of the industry, then yes, probably so. And it's been particularly a privilege for me over the years to, in an older age when individual soloists would come to the UK to get hired to play with people like Charlie Bird and Buddy DeFranco and Terry Gibbs, Arturo Sandoval, all kinds of amazing people. In a way that just simply doesn't happen anymore. That kind of all finished towards the end of the 1990s. That's all been gone about 20 years now. And we kind of hung on for a bit into the 2000s, but just to be able to play with all and of course all the great British musicians as well. I've never really done the pop music thing at all. I mean, I used to think when I was maybe, I don't know, 20 years younger that it would be a good career move, but it would only have been that. My heart certainly wasn't in it. I can go as well as anybody, and as consistently and with as good a pocket as anybody. But the difference is I don't quite mean it like they do. To me, that always would have been like just a means to an end. Whereas, playing the ride cymbal or playing the hi-hat
has always been like really to me what the drums are all about. And everything else that I ever did, all things that were not to do with jazz, and they were in kind of other fields of music, much more commercial. I always felt that they were actually subsidizing what I really wanted to play, and it was a means to an end to create a livelihood where I could play the music that I actually really was in my heart, and that's so I've actually ended up at this fairly advanced 57 years of age being exactly the drummer that I wanted to be when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
Which is nice. It's a nice place. Even though my diary is empty, it's a nice place to be.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You mentioned just a moment ago, we're talking about the nicest people in the world. Louis Bellson, of course, was absolutely, and we agree, the nicest man on earth. But you just mentioned a gentleman that I worked with that I think could stand right up there shoulder to shoulder with Louis Bellson on being nice. Buddy DeFranco.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what a nice man. And what a great player.
Oh, amazing. When I worked with Buddy, it was in a quintet with Terry Gibbs. And it was a British rhythm section. It was me, Brian Lemon on piano, who you probably remember, and Andy Klinder on bass. And of course, so you got Buddy and Terry out front, and they're just kind of they're doing shtick the whole time. Terry is when Terry's on the gig, he's either doing three things. One of three things: he's either playing, talking, or eating, and he just never stops. And he'd be saying, "Buddy, play the song, Buddy, play the song." And I made the classic mistake. One night we were playing, the Concord Club down in Eastleigh near Southampton. I'm sure you must have played there a number of times because I noticed your pictures on the wall in the bar. And I happened to mention, because he'd been getting a bit of notoriety in the drum industry, I had to mention Freddie Gruber to them one night, and they just never stopped laughing the whole night long. It's just like, I said, who is this guy Freddie Gruber? They just fell apart, and it just became like a running joke about Freddie Gruber. And, individually, both of them, two absolute giants of jazz. But together, and I'm very lucky that the BBC actually recorded, I think it was the show that we did at the Concord Club, the night that I mentioned Freddie Gruber. They did record that, and I have it somewhere, and it still sounds good. It sounds good.
That's great. It's good to have those, too.
Oh, yeah.
The careers that you and I have had, and some of the stories that you and I can tell,
I know.
Have these recordings to back us up, nobody would believe us.
That's true. Yeah, we should get together in person one of these days and do that too. I think that would be very nice.
Preferably with a big band in front of you both.
Yeah, or to the side.
Well, whichever, wherever. So, Butch, you've mentioned two of the nicest people on earth. Is there anybody you've worked for or with who's been the polar opposite of that? Or are you allowed to say? Or will you say?
Or tell us what you'd say.
There's been a few people that I've worked with many, many years ago that we didn't get along very well. But no, I've never worked for a leader that I didn't get along with at some point. I've worked with leaders where other people didn't get along with him, but I got along great with any number of people. Once again, it goes back to keep your ears open and your mouth shut.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I didn't do a lot of when I was younger. I got
Well, nobody does. Nobody does. You either grow out of it or you don't. And if you don't grow out of it, you don't stay around for very long.
Oh, absolutely. So, no, there were a lot of people who I worked for over the years that I really didn't get along all that well with. But after I stopped working for him, we became great friends. There was a gentleman when I first joined the Basie band. His name is John Hurd. He's still,
the bass player, yeah.
The bass player, John Hurd. I first joined the Basie band. John and I did not get along well at all.
Was it like a personality thing, or was it a musical thing?
No, musical. We were fine on stage. Personally,
Right.
it clashed. It just, I was wrong. He was wrong. It was, oil and vinegar. It just didn't.
Yeah.
It just really didn't work. And it was like that. We could play together, but we were just never friendly together. So here we go once again, many, many years later. I'm performing at a jazz party in Denver, Colorado. And as I used to do in the afternoon when everybody would show up, I would sit down in the lobby bar and I would drink and I would greet people when they'd come in, say hello and everything. And I would greet them more and more vociferously the more and more I had a little drink. So anyway, this one particular year, John Hurd comes in. I see him, motion him over, being a jolly fellow. Motion him, John, sit down, have a drink. How you doing, etc. So we make a little small talk for a few minutes, and we're both ill at ease. And then he says something that I really disagree with, and I've had just enough to drink. I called him a nasty name to his face. And he breaks out laughing. And he says, "Oh, you called me a little, and we've been best friends ever since."
Broke the ice.
What happened? It was just, I just got nasty, and it broke all the tension. And we've been, whenever we see each other, we'd sit down and catch up on old times.
That's nice. Yeah, the professional and personal relationships don't necessarily always kind of mesh. I mean, for a little while, I was contracting bands for Buddy Greco, and Buddy and I got on famously, but we've reached a point where, in terms of making the music happen, I just had to say to him, "Look, if we're going to stay friends, I can't work with you anymore." he would phone me, and I knew it was him, and I wouldn't pick up, and it's one of those things where you have a certain amount of time, and then you get a little bit too, I don't know, you get a little bit blasé around one another, and then you have to move on and let somebody else deal with the idiosyncrasies of the talent.
Butch, can I ask? I as well as being a very, very average drummer, I sing a lot. I sing a lot with big bands around the UK, and you've backed an awful lot of fantastic singers over the years. Do you enjoy playing with singers as much as you do like the instrumental stuff?
Who, me or Peter?
Sorry, to you, Butch.
Oh, I do. I didn't originally because I didn't particularly care for singers, especially, and I still have a bone to pick with people who think they can scat.
Yeah, really.
I'm sorry.
Not going to mention Ella, are you?
And then I worked with Mel Torme. So if you want to talk about Mel Torme or Joe Williams or Ella Fitzgerald, I'm fine.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about somebody else trying to scat, no. But I do. I enjoy working with singers now because I know what I'm supposed to do to make the singer sound good and solid and strong. And there's a certain way that you can play behind a singer that you don't play behind an instrumentalist or behind a shop course in a big band.
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about just a little while earlier. It was such a delight to work with Mel because I could just go out full force blazing and Mel could take it because he could override the band. He wrote all the arrangements anyway.
Yeah.
He knew what he was doing. And that was what he wanted. But some people, there's certain spots you don't play in and certain spots you just play just as a full, solid setup to make sure you can punch that. There's just so much you can do. You might get in the way. You might play too much. Something that irritates.
Yeah. It's a fine line then.
Pardon me?
It's a fine line between too much and not enough.
Very much. And it takes, once again, we get back to what Peter's been talking about, and I've been talking about, hearing. Use the ears. Listen to what you're playing and what they're doing, and then do something appropriate. More often than not, some of the great swinging drummers, Peter Erskine, I've known him since he was 15 years old. And one of the things he does that just kills me is he plays straight quarter notes on the ride cymbals sometimes and swings the hell out of a band. That's hard to do. But sometimes those quarter notes on that ride are appropriate, and they sound much better than a spang-a-lang, spang-a-lang, spang-a-lang.
Yeah, I can attest to that as a great singer who's she's actually from West Virginia, but she's lived in the UK for decades, who I MD for, a lady called Selena Jones. And her two favorite drummers that she worked with I think in times gone by are Grady Tate and Steve Gadd, both of whom are real specialists on just playing quarters on the ride, and that's all she wants. She doesn't want no offbeat eighth notes. She doesn't want any of that. She just wants four. I play the offbeat eighth notes in my left hand, but that's what she wants from the ride cymbal, whether it's slow, medium, or fast. Four, just four all the time.
Well, that was the way I was taught. I always played a four on the floor, no matter what tempo was.
Yeah.
And there was a time, Peter, when I could play four on the floor, no matter what the tempo was. These days, I sort of, I take a couple of shortcuts, you know what I mean? All the time. I also found out, strangely enough, after all these years of playing that bass drum constantly, that it's not always needed. Why? Because the music doesn't call for it.
Exactly. You know, that's why I like to see lead sheets. Particularly if it's a tune I don't know. If I can see it's like a lot of like simple 2/5 type progressions, then yeah. But if I see like kind of weird chords with lots of extensions and alterations on, then it's probably not going to want that kind of feel. I like to know the harmony. I like to know the changes, and so I find it very informative as to what needs to be played.
Yeah, you know what you're doing, absolutely.
Sure.
The first time I ever heard Max Roach live was in the Keystone Corner out in San Francisco. I'd gone to see him with Quebec, and I had the night off. So I went to see Max. I'd never seen him live. And partway through his first set, they played a tune that was pretty much almost like an older swing tune. And here's Max playing a straight-ahead swing with a four on the floor.
Yeah.
And I thought, Max Roach? What is he doing, man? So I asked him after the show, I said, Max, what were you doing? What were you playing four on the floor? What was that all about? And he said exactly what you just said. The music called for it.
Exactly.
He wasn't going to impose his specific style on a piece of music that wasn't written that stuff.
No.
It's a lesson I had to learn.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking, if we can go from quarter notes to full on, I've been looking over YouTube, Butch, and you play the fastest arrangement of Whirlybird I've ever heard anywhere. Obviously, isn't it a lefty tune, isn't it? Is it hefty?
Yeah.
Did you set the tempo for that? That is so fast. There's a version. It must be from your second incarnation with Basie, I'm imagining. Around, I don't know, mid 90s, something like that. That's a breakneck speed.
Well, I have to blame the drugs on that. Oh no, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I'm talking about something else. I'm making a joke. Basie started that every time.
Yeah.
He had a certain intro that he played, and it was never the same set of measures. I mean, he might play it for 8 measures. He might play it for 24. I don't know. He would play until the band was ready. And then he'd play his normal, bah, 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 bah. He said it wherever it was.
What?
Now, the amazing thing that I loved was trying to keep up, number one, with the tempo. And you'll dig this one, Peter. Number 2, I could always see Freddie Green. And the amazing thing was some nights I'm playing and I'm sweating and I'm huffing and puffing. And Freddie is over there still playing 4 to the bar. And changing the chords about every 2 beats, sometimes every beat, sometimes every 4 beats. But he kept up. He didn't go to These are always on these 4 beats. Freddie Green was amazing. So I had a lot to learn in that band, and I learned a lot.
Wow.
But that was
Wonderful.
So where are you at the moment then, Butch? Are you doing any playing? Well, nobody's doing any playing, but you're teaching, I guess, and hopefully looking forward to some playing at some point.
Okay.
Lesson 1.
No drums here, just sticks.
That's all you need.
And I'm not even playing those. I'm teaching.
Yeah.
I teach at a university 3 days a week, and there's no place to play, although around Austin is a very musical city. There's a lot of music in Austin, a lot of clubs, a lot of musicians. Some have been taking part in live performances through Zoom, and they position themselves. They're far enough away so that they're social distancing. They all wear masks except when a horn player is playing, and they put on performances for about an hour or so, and you can tune in and you can make donations.
Oh yeah.
With PayPal or with your credit cards or something like that.
Yeah.
And some of the guys are doing that. I've seen that happening in the United States more and more because there's nowhere to play. There's no place to play. And even when I'm on campus, I don't get much of a chance to do anything except warm up a little bit. And I don't do hardly anything at all right now.
Yeah. Because I know you've done a couple of gigs lately, Pete.
Yeah, I've had a couple of things, just really literally 1 or 2. One just very close to home the other night, and another one down on the coast a couple of weeks ago. But really, just waiting for, wishing the next few months away, and I mean, practicing. I haven't lost the practice motivation at all, because I don't relate practice to playing. To me, practice is just an end in itself, and what it brings to my playing at the end of that is just a bonus. And I will always do at least an hour every afternoon. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3. It depends on how I feel. But and getting things done, and all this limited opportunity to go to work has enabled me to develop some things that I've been thinking about for years. Just haven't had the time to focus on them until now. So it's kind of a blessing in disguise, I suppose.
Yeah. But let's hope we can get back to some normality, some gigs.
Let's hope we can do that very soon.
And let's hope, Butch, that you end up in the UK alongside Pete with a couple of drum sets and preferably your smoking hot big band, Pete. That would be.
That's something I would like very much.
There you go. I would like that.
Do you know what, Butch? I'll even come and check that your bass drum beater isn't going to fall out for you. How's that?
Fantastic.
Gentlemen, look, thank you very much for doing this, Pete.
What
really
an
appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. This has just been fantastic for me. Really.
No,
I know we're not all together in person, but just to hang out with you in this virtual cyberspace kind of way, it's just been amazing. I am so grateful for you for having been, as I say, let's finish it right where we started. You're my only formative influence who's still alive, and just for having been there and doing the right thing that gave this 14-year-old the clarity to see what was possible. Thank you, man.
Thank you. I never knew this. See, Matthew, what you can get sometimes. I never knew this, and I'm thrilled.
Well, I've been waiting for the opportunity to tell you for years. So there you know.
Well, thank you so much, Peter. I do appreciate that. We're going to have to get together, I hope.
I think so.
With your smoking hot big band.
I think we should do that.
Just take it easy on me. I'm the old guy around here now. Let's see, what year is this? This is 2020. So I'm 76 now.
Right. No, I'm just coming up to the age where what I think where Buddy was when he was actually hitting his peak. So getting up towards 60.
Well, I'll come to the audience and I'll listen to the band and I will stand and applaud.
Get up and play. Get up and play.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Gentlemen, Pete, thank you so much. And of course, Butch, what can I say? It's been a privilege. It really has. Great to hear you both, firing the questions both ways. There's obviously a great respect between you both as well. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you. Terrific.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.